So we will be taking questions in the chat box. At the end of our webinar, we will send out our survey. We ask that you take time out of your day to do that. And without further ado, take it, Ms. Vonda. It's all yours.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. I always enjoy doing these webinars. I really, really do. I love my job and I love talking. So I think that's a good fit. So, China and them asked me to speak, and I go, yes, that would be a great idea, I think. I'm an occupational therapist. My name is Vonda Flue, as she said, and I've been an occupational therapist for about 28 years now. And I currently work with not only in the pediatric field, but also in the mental health field. And so I actually juggle both and love both quite well. Let's see how this works out. We just got our new logos in for trauma. I think you can see it. Trauma informed occupational therapist, or trauma informed OT. And I like the little logo because it really shows what we do as an occupational therapist. When we're working with trauma, we are, using their hands. As you see the hands, I'm trying to keep it steady. I'm sorry. I'm not doing a very good job. Hold on. Let me do this. There. Using our hands, and it grows through the roots up into a brain, which looks kind of like a tree. But as an occupational therapist, my job is to help people with doing something. You're doing something and participating in your own recovery process or growth process, whether it's physical or mental, or emotional. So I love working with the brain. I really, really do. I think it's fascinating. I think the way it's connected to the body and our behavior is absolutely fascinating, but simple. It really is simple. I think in the medical society, we have somehow overcomplicated things. And so I love to teach and help people learn some simple techniques to help them and maybe them and their child. So themselves, or, or a family member. And so I hope that tonight is simple. Yes, I'm going to be presenting it as an occupational therapist, but some things and practical things that you can do, and also how you can maybe see things a little differently than what gets labeled sometimes as behavior, might actually be some sensory integration problems. So I am going to switch over, or some sensory integration difficulties, to my screen. Sometimes I know how to do these things. Share screen. And here it goes. So I need to put it on. There, can everybody see that okay? All right, so hopefully you can see that. If you don't, let me know in the chat, please. But sensory integration, seeing things through their eyes, is the name of our webinar. I have presented it a few years in a row for Families Helping Families, and this year I kind of had a few different things I thought I would share. So sensory integration, it's a term that I use as an occupational therapist, but I want to make sure everybody understands that it's not a term that everybody uses. It's integrating or organizing all of the sensory information we take in from the world every day, such as, and it's your senses: smell, touch, sound, sight, and movement. It's not just your basic senses, but it's your senses. It's organizing. So it's our understanding of the outside world. It's what we see, what we hear, how it feels to be touched, what we smell. It is all of those senses. And we have to take in those senses. And, as an occupational therapist, that name is a little different. An occupational therapist, I deal with occupations, not just as a job. We think of it as a job, but basically a child's occupation is developing. It's going to school, it's doing academics, it's motor coordination, it's socialization and participation. So a child's occupation is doing those type things. So, the term occupational therapist might get a little mixed up to a job, but it's not. It's what you need to do at time in your life to move forward for growth and for success. And that involves everyday activities, interactions with the world through your sensory system. And you see the 5 systems there, but you also see that we have body position. There's other ones, balance. So vestibular, kinesthetic, those type things are also part of our sensory system. So, as an occupational therapist, I use a systematic way of helping individuals with negative sensory experiences and negative behaviors by helping them do this. Okay. The three things I put it down when I was thinking about this, about how I do it as an occupational therapist. I'm going to go through these, but first is I reorganize the nervous system. Then I reflect, which means I slow down and I let them feel and learn and process that newly organized system, and then they can respond appropriately. They can respond in a better way because they've had time to have some work on that nervous system, but also to process it. And we'll talk about that a little bit, all of these in more detail. So when I talking about reorganizing the nervous system, that sounds like a really, a little specific and technical, but basically everything we do requires sensory integration. Lorna Jean King says this normal process can be missing or very badly organized in some people, notably autistic individuals. And this was on autism.com website as they interviewed her. But everything we do requires sensory integration. Okay. So when I say reorganize the nervous system, it's more than just your mind. Dr. Patty Shackleford with the Maskatova method says often children who find controlling their movements difficult usually find controlling their emotions equally challenging. If you think about that, this is the example I give all the time. In the Olympics, there was a man, I can't think of his name right now, but he was doing speed skating and he was slated to win. He had won a lot of records in like the world championships and stuff, but he had just found out right before his time to go out there that his family member had some negative thing happen. And so he went out there and he fell. And I mean, everybody was like, "Oh my goodness, what just happened?" He that's not his norm, but his mind was not quite, kind of like the get your head in the game. And then he came back another year and something else happened. And then he came back and he won gold another time. But it was just a way of saying that, you know, our mind and our body go together. And so I like to say that in therapy, I'm working on both. I know they're coming in maybe for some fine motor difficulties, and with some sensory integration problems, but I'm looking at the whole picture. And if you really think about it, we're getting that nervous system reorganized so that their movements can get better, so that their processing of their senses and the sensory world around them can get better. Normal daily demands, I put this picture on here, can be stressful. We know this as adults. If children have this, it's a little bit harder. I with an adult brain here know that when I'm feeling off, I can't always respond that way, that I have to control some of my behaviors and emotions. For children, their brains are not fully developed. So that's harder from them. But these are some of the things that become stressful that we may not even think about, like the humming of the lights are distracting. That's called accommodation. That's like when I'm sitting in a classroom, the air conditioner and the humming of the lights, my brain accommodates, and which means it tunes it out as irrelevant noise that's going to be in the background so I can focus on what's important. But if you have sensory processing or auditory processing or auditory sensitivity, that becomes very difficult because you hear it the entire day. You hear it all the time, and it's an equal volume maybe as your teacher who's talking. So we don't think about some of those things. What if they hear the kids breathing next to them? People are laughing or talking too loud. Sometimes like I say, we're talking a lot of auditory, but maybe the kid next to me sits too close. Just that touch, that space, that personal space. The bright lights I have and what I've done in my sensory room is I put those blue shades over the lights, the fluorescent lights, which helps bring that brightness down, and it's very calming. So it's like a blue filter is what it's called. Smell is a sense we don't think about often. We wear people, not me, I don't. We wear perfumes. When people wear Axe body spray, you spray stuff on your head and your hair, and someone may be very sensitive to that and they can't get away. And sometimes the interesting thing is they don't know how to tell us what's bothering them exactly. They're not that proficient yet at being very specific sometimes. Seats too hard, clothes are too irritating, teachers' words are too fast and confusing, which I get accused of all the time. Sorry. I can't listen and write at the same time, We're going to talk about that one specifically in a minute. The sound of the bell is horrifying. It just scares them every time it happens. So I can't think or focus. Get me out of here. So what looks like behavior problems may actually be some sensory processing problems. You see all of these senses that are going on here that are difficult for them to process. So when I say reorganize the nervous system, this is a good visual I found. All of this stuff is coming into the brain and it needs to make an organized response. And we do that, pretty well most of the time. Here's another way to look at it. I like to have different pictures of kind of the same thing. You see where the thalamus is like the relay station. So you can see that all of your senses go to the thalamus, except for that one at the bottom. That's my favorite one. That's my absolute favorite one. It's smell. Smell through the olfactory bulb goes straight to your limbic system. Get that? Smell will eventually go through the thalamus, but it goes directly to the emotional center of your brain, the limbic system. And that helps with regulating much faster, I find, than many other things. But all of those things have to be processed. So there's a lot going on with all of these senses going through and then getting sent to different places in the brain. But that's called sensory integration. That's called sensory organization and coordination. All of that is working. That's a lot in one way. Don't be overwhelmed by that. Again, we're going to make it simple, but I just want you to see that it's a processing issue that's sometimes happening. Some signs of sensory processing disorder. These are a few different ones. May they cover their ears, such as loud sounds, when there are loud sounds, such as vacuums, hair dryers, scream or cry, food sensitivities with textures, can't be touched or can't be touched enough. So there's hypo and hypersensitive in all of these areas. Little or no reaction to stimuli such as pain or extreme hot. They don't know that. They just like their hair being cut or brushed, or teeth being brushed. And it may be the texture of the brush. It may be the feeling in their mouth. It may be the scent or the taste of the toothpaste. You have to look at that. Maybe sensitive to light. So you can read some of these, but the hyper on the maybe excessive risk taker or crashing into things. So those are some things that can look like behavior issues, but the more likely they might be some sensory processing problems. It's a different graphic. I like it, but look at the bottom, because the next slide is really my big slide that I want to show. So sensory registration of the sensory information is at the bottom. Then you have, are they alert enough? Are they modulating all that's coming in? Their perception, all of this goes upward. Then they have motor skills. Then they have motor execution. And then they have organized behavior. So they've got to get some sensory integration at the bottom before organized behavior comes at the top, which another really good way to show it, which is my favorite slide, is not next. Okay, sorry. Okay, let me see something. Yes, okay, I'm gonna try to go back. I don't know how to go back. Yes, there. So when we're reorganizing the nervous system, parents will say things like, I've tried all kinds of things, I just want them to be calm. They're trying to do some things, but you know what? You've heard this probably before. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is internal. So my body can automatically tune out those externals we were talking about earlier, like the humming of the lights. If I'm calm inside, that's not going to get on my last nerve. That's not going to be another irritation in the system. I have some peace internally because I have my sensory processing is really pretty effective and efficient most of the time. So even if I did have a place where I had some humming that was a little louder than normal for me, I still would go, okay, it's louder than normal. I'm in a new room. I'm going to, let's say, a continuing ed class, and there's a louder noise than normal that's in the background, but I'm going to keep working on focusing more intently on the teacher so I can get what's going on. That's if I'm in tip top shape with my sensory system. What if I didn't have a good night's sleep? What if I went, I traveled to Houston and went to a continuing education course and I didn't get a good night's sleep that night, and I hadn't had one the night before, and the roads are really bumpy and I got jarred around all over, and I got to the class and it was very, very cold, and this loud noises in the background. Do you see this? Do you see what I'm setting up now? Now the noise in the background is a little bit more irritating, and they ran out of coffee, maybe. Now that noise in the background is something different. So what I want to look at is, yes, we want to remove and we want to modify the environment as much as possible, but I as an occupational therapist, would like to give them the skill set to be able to work through when things aren't perfect, when not say perfect, but things aren't just right, or like they normally are. How do you process and work through? Because as I put here, peace is internal. Removing the externals helps a lot, but externals can be tuned out if we have the resources to do that. And like I said just a minute ago, this is my favorite. This is one of my favorite slides to show, because if you will look at the bottom of the big squares, the foundational squares, we are talking about the sensory systems. It says that. So we've got smell, taste, touch, auditory, vision, vestibular, and proprioception. Vestibular, dealing with your sense of movement and balance, and proprioception, where your joints are in space. That deep pressure sense also as well. So then we've got sensory motor development. So once we have those basic senses, we're going to have a little bit of movement going on. So we've got postural security, we've got motor planning, awareness of two sides of the body, reflex maturity, because as a baby, they're pretty much dominated by reflexes, stereotypical patterns like an asymmetrical tonic neck reflex. So they're pretty much governed by these stereotypical movements that help them develop. Like when they're crawling, their head should come upright, because that reflex for the neck reflexes are kicking in. So that, and the ability to screen input, eye-hand coordination, ocular eye-hand coordination basically is ocular motor, or it could be just ocular, where they're just moving and they're tracking. So they're tracking balls moving so they can catch them when you roll a ball to them, or when you toss a big ball, an outside playground ball to them, their eyes can track it and their hands can catch it. Postural adjustment. Then we get up to the blue ones, where we have behavior. We have daily living activities such as dressing yourself. Now we have auditory language skills, visual spatial perception, and attention center functions. And at the very top is the cognitive or intellect or academic learning. What I see is that so many times people are coming and their goals are the purple and the blue. Sometimes they don't realize that all that yellow below is what's affecting at the top. And you've got to get some of those set. And I'll give you some examples. This is what I thought of. What if we're looking at behavior and you're saying to yourself, I need to work on better behavior. Okay, I get that. That's why you came in. You and the child need assistance to get to focus, to behave, to stop touching everything, stop fidgeting. So, but this behavior pyramid is that behavior is standing on all these other things. So what if let's look at this. What if it's, taking a shower? You say, they just won't take the shower. They fuss and they just won't go in there. And when they get in there, they don't do it all right. And they don't remember the steps. And I've told them the steps all over again. But what if they're having postural security problems that didn't get developed well? I say this all the time: tummy time, tummy time, tummy time, tummy time. I can't say that enough, because that develops those spinal muscles, that pushes up on those arms, develops those neck muscles, lets them know how to bear weight on their arms, and then later they're ready to bear weight on their bottom, and then catch themselves with their arms when they're sitting up so they don't fall over, and then they're ready to bear weight on their legs and catch themselves with their arms if they fall over. So there's a lot that goes in, and tummy time is so, so, so important. So what if they're having some postural problems in the shower, and they're afraid, but they don't really know that they're afraid. They just don't say, I won't do it. I'm not going to do it, because they're scared. They don't know to tell you all those things. But we need to know that there might be something a little lower. What if it's a body scheme issue where they don't realize they have upper and lower legs? When kids draw bodies, at younger ages, you got, your arms coming out of your head. As they get older, they realize, oh, wait a minute, my arms are not coming out of my head. I have a square or a rectangle. That's my body, my trunk that holds my belly. It holds my heart. It holds my lungs. It holds my insides. And my arms come out of that. Sometimes they don't only have that, but that's a body scheme issue. What if they don't realize they have a back of their neck or the back of their head? I mean, Let me tell you, when you have young children, they brush their hair in front of the mirror and that's all they see is the front. You have a back of your head, you should go brush that. But that's an awareness that they use without their vision, their body scheme awareness, back of their neck to wash the back of their neck or to wash the back of their hair. Awareness of two sides of the body. If you switch, that we always start with the washcloth or whatever in the dominant hand, but you got to switch it to the non-dominant hand so you can wash the other side of the body. Maybe that's not something that's very clear to them, or maybe they don't feel comfortable because they're out of sync on right and left side. I mean, there is some, lesser coordination typically on the non-dominant side, but what if that's what's going on? Do you see what I'm just saying? There's a lot of other things that might be happening. So if you say, well, you know what, up this daily living's activity, I just want them to feed themselves without spilling the food. But what if they have an unintegrated grasp reflex and they can hold on to that spoon, but now they have to hold on the spoon, scoop the food, make sure the food doesn't fall off while transitioning it from the plate to their mouth. And that reflex is good enough to hold on to something, but it's not good enough to do a dynamic or a moving movement, a moving activity like holding the food on the spoon while the spoon is in motion. And then sometimes parents are like, well, you see, they want something with attention, but do you see where attention center functions are? They're up at the top. So the ability to screen input is going to be vital to attention, because if I constantly am hearing that humming and then it kind of moves and it goes off and on, the AC kind of goes off and on, and I hear that noise as it comes on, it's going to draw my attention every time. Or what if when that door opens in school so that a kid can come in, that's loud to me and I look over it and then I've lost my place. What did the teacher just say? Oh my goodness, she just gave instructions. They can't screen the input of the kid that dropped his pencil. And that's a big deal. And their whole head turns around and look. And when they turn around and look, they can't keep listening to the teacher. Do you get what I'm saying? What I'm saying there? So what if they're having problems coordinating, I'm sorry, and sustaining eye tracking for reading, because you have to go across a page with smooth pursuits. Sometimes we give them a ruler or you let them use their fingers, but as they get older, they tend to not use those coping skills as much. But what about if they have to copy from the board to their paper, and that up down ocular motor, eye coordination, eye tracking is not integrated well or not smooth? That's also what happens on tummy time. I tell people there's so much that happens on tummy time. When they're there on their belly, they follow, a parent or a sibling from one side of the room to the other with what I call head leveling. They go all the way across to the other side, and then somebody moves and they go all that. So they're going right to left, and then they get tired and they put their head down. They look at something, they look at their fingers, and then a noise happens and they pick their head up and they track from up to down to up and up to down. So they're tracking objects while their body is remaining still and their head separates from their body. That is such good tracking skills. So I don't know why I have it blank here. So, that's that pyramid that we're looking at a lot going on. It's kind of like the iceberg principle. You see a little bit at the top, but there's a lot below it. So this is another quote from Lorna Jean King. People need to be re-educated to understand that behavior is always communication. It's always telling us something. I love that. It's always telling us something. People often use the word behavior. Oh, they're having, that this behavior is going on. And what they're kind of saying, as she says, it means bad behavior. But actually, often the child doesn't know any other way to tell us. I was looking at this training that's in interoception, and it's being aware of your internal organs. And some kids don't have that. They don't understand that feeling of emptiness or too full in their stomach. They don't know and understand when their bladder is full, they need to go to the bathroom until they're about to use it in their and lose it in their pants, because they've not listened to the signal until it's almost too late. Same thing with bowel movements. Those are all internal things that are going on that we should have an awareness of as well. That's a sensory system as well. It's our business to find out what the behavior is communicating. Often sensory sensitivities are actually painful, and the child's behavior is an attempt to escape. They that fabric feels terrible to them. But they get this shirt, that yellow shirt, and this yellow shirt, and they don't really know to tell you that articulate. They don't know how to articulate that well. They don't know that. They just say, "I don't want to wear clothes," because maybe you bought all their clothes at the same store or something. You know what I'm saying? And so clothes in general, or the tags, or where that waistband is fitting on them, or how the waistband is. It a stretchy waistband? I mean, have you ever taken off a pair of stretchy waistband pants and the marks are still on you? I mean, you don't notice them while you're there, but when you take it off, you're like, wow, I didn't notice this was this tight at all. Well, that child with sensory processing problems may, and that's not really good. Or the one with the belt is too tight, and they don't know how to tell you that's just the way it's been. I've noticed that with kids when it's been something that maybe has been around for a long time, maybe since birth, they don't know how to tell you it's not right because that's all they've ever known. By being observant, finding out what triggers the behavior, we can modify the environment and help the child to find acceptable ways to cope, such as wearing earphones to protect himself from too much noise. As we use sensory integrative therapy to raise the child's threshold for arousal. So, in therapy, I'm going to be helping him to desensitize to loud noises or those type things. And provide calming inputs, we can see improvements in behavior as we were talking about. So there's twofold. We'll talk about that in a minute. So after we reorganize the sensory system, we're going to respond appropriately. So my job as an OT is to help calm the nerves down. So I talk and I say this quite often. This is not good grammar, but it's a great way to say it. They need to experience safe and calm. And then you say safe, but sometimes they're in fight or flight because that loud noise puts them into a panic. So I'm saying safe, not necessarily from being safe as in a really bad situation. I'm talking like they just feel unsafe in the moment. You can never talk or teach an experience. Okay. I can tell you, or I can tell someone to calm down, and they're like, I am calm. This is calm. This is my calm. I don't know what you're talking about. This is normal. And we feel like, no, that's not a normal. You're talking loud. You're talking fast. Your breathing is elevated. I can see your veins popping out of your neck. I don't think you're calm, but they don't know that. So what I like to do is I like to let them feel calm and safe. So we're doing the swinging together. That's a sensory modality. And they start looking around at things. It's very great to see them. They start looking around at things in the clinic or the environment and noticing things they've never noticed before because they're learning what it feels like to be calm. And what I absolutely love about this whole thing is I can teach, I can let them experience calm. But what I just think is the best thing in the entire world is that the body really does love calm. So when you provide it, instead of having to ask them if they want it or them to think through, do I want to go be calm on the swing? They come in and go, can we do the next swing? Can we do the swing? They go over and they want the swing because the body likes that. It goes, thank you. We call it homeostasis as well. When it's kind of equal and it's not too high, not too low, it's just right. And the body will seek out that calming behavior now. I get the body to work with me. I don't want to just talk through everything because, again, we've got some emotional components going on here, and that's fueling some of the things that are happening at the top of that pyramid. So I had this mom that sent this back to me, and I continue to put it in there because I want you to understand kind of how it works. I taught some things to them. It was very short. I was out of town. And that's my husband's name, Ken. Hi, Vonda and Ken. I wanted you to know how the sensory activities have made a huge difference in him. He has had times of being escalated, and with the activities, he has been able to de-escalate and maintain. We're going to talk about that in a minute. His therapy team does it similar to what you did at camp, Vonda, quietly without anyone noticing. Look, this is my sentence. He now knows cognitively how it feels to be calm. That is a first ever in his life. Because of that, he is now asking for breaks more often. More normally, it was just an explosive behavior because that was the only way he knew to get out of what was not right. And also asking for the activities. Wow, it was an incredible week with him starting to identify his own needs. Praise the Lord, this is the first ever. He's also asking for it nightly too. Now we need to try to teach the school what to do. So, I mean, just a really good testimony of when they finally get it, they get it and they can start saying, I liked that. That felt good. That felt calming. I felt better afterwards. That helped me go back in the classroom and finish the activity and the time. That helped me calm down enough to go in there, take my bath, even though I don't want to. I could do it, scenarios like that. So in responding, I see this all the time. You notice I said maintain, she said maintain it, because sometimes they can achieve calm, but they can't always maintain it because most of them don't understand how they got there in the first place. It was like, and I hear parents say, but I know they can do it. They did it before. Most of them really honestly don't know how they did it before. It just happened to happen. Because if you're not seeing it on a consistent basis, then it's not learned behavior yet. It was something that just happened. So that's something we talk about. Anybody here slip up and do something really good? And sometimes we take credit of it, but some of us are brave enough to say, I did it, but I really don't know how that happened. Thanks for telling me good job, but I'm not sure how all that fell into alignment and I got that done. They're the same way. So, you know, sometimes with sensory processing challenges, this is what I explained to some of the parents, 2 + 2 is equal to so many different things. And which one's correct? This put feels this way this time, and that same input feels different. And then another day it felt really bad, and another time it felt really good, and another time it felt weird, like nothing it's ever felt before. And so learned behavior is something that happens over and over again in the same way. But if 2 + 2 = 5 or 17 or 794 or -30 or 4 or 2, they don't know which one's correct. So we need to give them appropriate response over and over again, and then let them respond appropriately over and over again. And that's what we do in the clinic. We practice skills and different skills. I want to point that out. I do not teach the task. I want to teach a skill, because if I can teach a task, then they're going to go to a new environment and they're not going to know what to do. But if I teach the skill, then they're going to go to a new environment and they're going to take those same skill set and they can be able to be successful in a new environment. So I love this one. The quieter you become, the more you can hear. Once that irrational, and I say that because they're maybe screaming because of the bell. So I'm saying that respectfully, but because it's not rational. You should not have that much anxiety because your sensory processing system should be processing that is just a vacuum cleaner and it's loud, but we can cover our ears and we can go to the room. But once that is turned off, it allows listening and processing to occur. They need to be quiet and not quiet. They need to, like I say, calm down. And then because sometimes they can hear our words, but are they able to process our words and formulate an organized, appropriate response? How many of us were told as children, I know you hear me, but you're not listening? you know, um, that stress that's going inside that brain, it may hear some words, but it's not processing. And then it has a difficult time having an organized response. And then there's more and more sensations coming in. So that doesn't always make for a conducive environment for learning. So this is how we respond appropriately. We talked about the limbic system earlier. That smell goes straight to the limbic system. Here's a little bit more about that. The limbic system is where we process emotions. The limbic system also governs our appetite, our libido, our sleep cycles, and bonding. If the limbic system gets thrown out of balance through too much stress, it can make regulating our appetites and our moods more difficult. When we lose the capacity to regulate our uncomfortable emotions ourselves, when too much uncontrollable stress makes it hard for us to find our own balance after an upset, we may turn to something outside of ourselves to soothe our frayed feelings. It's natural. So we have a stressful time. You say, you know what? I need to go take a nap. I have the stressful event. I'm going to get some coffee because I need to process better, and I'm not processing, and caffeine makes me process better. Think about that. That's what we do as an adult. We go for our things that we can, or I'm going to go walk outside. I'm going to go, do whatever. Children have limited resources, and you say, well, I give them, but they can't just go walk outside. We want to keep them as safe as adults. They can't say, hey, can I have Coke? Well, you may say, no, it's 3:00 in the afternoon. You can't have a Coke right now. You'll be up and it's maybe too much caffeine. So you see what I'm saying? We can have a little bit more control over what we choose. They do not. So that's normal when they're having these sensory processing problems, and that limbic system where we're having emotional things going on. It gets out of balance, and they are trying in some way to figure out how we would like to find out and say, hey, we understand you're having this problem in this scenario or situation. How can we give you a bucket of things to choose from that are more appropriate than screaming and throwing things? Because we understand you need to process what's going on and you're upset. So I found this from a mom and I found it on a website and I cannot go back and find it. And I wish this mom, I mean, I want to say this, whoever this was, but this mom said this and I was like, oh my goodness, I want to put this in here. Says, hello, I wanted to comment on food intolerances and sensory integration. For the past 25 years, I've been researching and trying everything to help my children and I with food tolerances and ended up being stressed by all the diets. Each child had different intolerances and foods to buy, prepare, medicines, supplements to take at different times, etc. I was getting worse. So I started tracing digestion backwards. To sum it up, and she said a lot more, but it was a long little thing. But to sum it up, what I discovered was it all came down to the nervous system being safe and calm. Did you see those words earlier? When we are in a state of fight, flight, or freeze, and the sympathetic nervous system is kicked in, digestion stops. As it takes about 24 hours to have the system fully recoup from the initial surge of hormones, most people live in a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze. Eventually, it leads to a complete exhaustion of the nervous system. A balanced nervous system is able to respond when needed and not react to everything. I was like, that is so amazing that she found that out because that's what I'm looking for. How can I get it to calm down? Because, many times for a child, and maybe a little older child, but even it doesn't have to be very old. It's so interesting how once we get into a little routine, we get a little calm. We've sat on the swing together. We're working on making a bracelet with some beads. I can ask, hey, when something, what happens at your house or something that leads to, and do you know why you feel out of control and you start throwing things? And you know what's so surprising? Sometimes they can tell me very well. And it's amazing because they're not in a state of fight or flight and running around. They're calm and their brain just is able to formulate an answer. And then sometimes, like I just recently had, that person was sitting there, that young person was sitting there, and they were giving a valid consideration to an answer. And then they just looked up and said, I really don't know. And I said, that's okay. How about you and I work on it a little bit more? And they said, that's fine. But they were able to sit and think. And that's what I want. They can tell us so much if we can get them into the right frame of mind to tell us. You all know that. Think about, I used to have a slide on here and I don't know what happened to it, but it was from the bomb that went off on the Boston Marathon. And there's one picture of a guy and he has his head kind of cowered down, lowered, because he doesn't know you could tell he doesn't know something huge has happened and he doesn't know. So he's had his head down like, is something going to drop on me? And his arms are up by his head. He is like, whoa, what's going on? Do I need to duck? Do I need to run? And you're not going to ask him at that time articulate questions. Even after everything is calmed down, maybe the police or whoever's responding, the people that are trying to figure out what's going on are asking him. And he's like, I don't know. I don't know. I heard something. I'm not sure where it came from. At that same, not a balanced nervous system at that point. And think about it, this is what I like to point out too. The bombing was over. Everybody was safe. Let's just say we had everything. I don't think he probably went into work the rest of that week. And I don't know, but I'm just saying, I think it would be totally understandable to say, hey, that was a big deal. Why don't you take some time and fully process and recover, get your mind straightened out and come back next Monday. That's appropriate. So sometimes just removing the stressful things does not always make for, boom, you're back and you're responding appropriately. Sometimes they need some time to process. So I take my time, as I just said, I build trust and relationship, and then I involve others. I'm asking the parents if we need to. We're asking the teachers because sometimes there's a little bit different things going on at home than at school. Sometimes it's the same thing, but a different scenario. Caregivers, siblings, if appropriate, other professionals, getting other input. We go, oh, that happens there, but not there. Well, let's think about this then. And so, taking your time. Now, as a parent, I would say, There are lots of things out there. I'm not doing this seminar, so this webinar, so you can come to an occupational therapist. There are a lot of things out there. This is to just pull these two as a couple that I've used before. It's really good. I recommend a lot the Out of Sync Child. It was written by a as you can see at the bottom, Carol Kranowitz was I think first grade teacher, and this occupational therapist, Lucy Jane Miller. Or that's a preface. Anyways, there was an OT that came in the room. So it's not her necessarily, but she would come in the room and she began to talk to her. So this book is written so nicely because the first grade teacher wrote it and put it in everyday language, not therapy language. And there's checklists in there. So you go through this checklist and see if my child has these behaviors, maybe this is the sensory system they have a problem with. And there's a few little activities, but there's also another book called The Out of Sync Child Has Fun. And so there's lots of activities for what you see might be going on. So there are resources out there. And there's another one, a buffet of sensory interventions, and that's for middle and high school students on the autism spectrum. But at the same time, their sensory processing is in there. So that's a really good book. There are other good books. These are not just the only ones, but those are nice. So what I'm saying is there's ways that you can find out. You can give those checklists to the teacher. Give the checklist to a grandparent or somebody else that keeps them and say, hey, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Let's make fill out this checklist and see where is the most prominent area that they're struggling in the sensory system. Because we got all these sensory inputs coming. You see that? And we want a nice, what we call adaptive response. And I think I love ending with this picture. This is actually that last slide, because look at that smiling face. Because like I say, I love for, success to me is when they come in and say, hey, this new thing happened. And guess what I did? I was able to do blah, blah, blah. And they named some things and they didn't. Either they didn't have a meltdown, they walked away and cooled off and came back or whatever. Yes, that's a win. That's great. They went to a new environment and they're like, it bothered me, but I just kept breathing and I looked at stuff I knew I could handle and I walked, they can take that skill set and go somewhere in a new environment and still have success. So that is all that I have. So if someone has some questions or you want to type something in the chat, I see it's there. Let me see. Just there. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can type them in, I think. And China, if you want to take over.
Oh, I had started talking and didn't unmute. So, yes, ma'am. Let's see. So this is an opportunity for everybody to ask Ms. Vonda what needs to be asked, because she only does this webinar once a year.
Once a year.
So
every year.
Yes. So do we have any questions? Let's see. Okay. It seems as though we actually not have any.
China, we have a hand raised.
Bob?
I don't see that. Good call.
We do? Let me see.
Yes.
Oh, I just raised my hand. Okay. Okay, here it is. It says, do we have a copy of tonight's webinar?
Well, we recorded it, so you can rewatch it. Is that what you're? I think.
Yeah, I think that's what they were asking. Like whether or not you were gonna hand out the PowerPoint that you went over.
Hand out. Well, it's on, we'll do it on. I mean, that's the video's out, so you can rewatch the video and look at that. So I don't have a copy of all the stuff.
Okay.
So, but you'll have this webinar on their site. So yeah, that'll be.
Yeah.
Rewatch it.
It will actually be posted to our YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yes, yes, yes. Wallace, if you don't mind, can you put that information in the chat so that they'll know where to find this particular webinar?
The YouTube information?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah. So we actually do record a lot of our webinars. So it's not just sensory integration that will be recorded. Earlier today, I did early steps transition, and I partnered with Miss Melinda Elliott on the school side, and those are recorded as well. So if y'all interested in seeing any of the webinars that we have done in the past, you are welcome to go to our YouTube channel. If y'all know of any or interested in any webinars that we haven't actually touched on, but y'all find a topic to be interested, by all means, put it in your survey so that we can work on getting that type of information out to you. Okay?
Yes. And I want to kind of, if I could, I think we have one person that's raised their hand. Looks like Miss Carol Romero. So I don't know how to quite do that. But, as I want to say that I'm not recommending in necessarily any treatment for specific for any child. This is just for educational purposes. So I need to say that so that it's not, this is just an educational webinar. I'm not diagnosing or treating anything, but I'm glad to offer some just general free educational tips, and hopefully that helps. So I think Miss Carol has her hand raised, but again, I don't know exactly what to do with that.
And we appreciate that. Miss Carol, do you have a question? You put it in the chat. I see Wallace have included in the chat the YouTube channel and also the link so they're able to go directly to it.
Is it okay? Is it okay if I allow them to talk? Because maybe they don't know how to do chat.
Yeah, sure.
All right, let me do that.
Okay, so Wallace is gonna unmute the guest so that y'all able to ask Ms. Vonda the questions that y'all want to ask.
Okay, Carol, can you unmute? It should be, I think, near the bottom of your screen, right, where to unmute, right?
Yes.
I've accidentally raised my hand before is what I'm saying. So.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe she accidentally raised her hand.
We don't want to give her too much pressure. Maybe she accidentally, but you can always, if you need to contact me, VondaFlue.com, and there's a place for questions. So you can always do that.
Okay.
But,
Howard, do you have a question?
Or Miss Carol. Oh, Miss Carol's unmuted. I don't know. Oh,
okay.
Howard.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you ma'am.
Okay. The child doesn't talk, and how would you go through any kind of therapy or any way of helping this child when you know that they need help, but you don't know how or what to do to help them? You know they have sensory problems.
Oh, and they don't talk?
No.
Yeah, I like that book I was showing where basically you're just going through a checklist and you're looking at in that book, Out of Sync Child, and you just check off behaviors so they don't have to talk to you. When in the clinic, I give a sensory, not that book, but I give a sensory checklist to the parent, and the parent fills it out, and that gives me indications on what's going on with the child.
Okay.
So you could, that's what I was saying, you could have a teacher fill it out. You could have a caregiver or someone else fill it out as well. But that's what you're doing, is you're getting feedback from what you're seeing going on. So the questions are asking, do they have fear when they're at the top of a slide? Do they not like, so it's asking general questions. And then you say, oh, there's a lot of things I checked off as yes in this checklist in that book, so.
On your pyramid, there was a lot of things that you had there that we do recognize that he does have. And we recognize certain things and we try to help. Like I said, he doesn't speak, but he'll get upset. And of course, then he runs and carries on, and I can't communicate. Now I feel bad because I can't communicate and understand how to help him.
Yeah. And there's some things, like I said, in that book that say, hey, if they're having issues in this one area, because it's just general, like I was giving the general calming techniques or something like that. They're just general things that you can start trying. And the Out of Sync Child Has Fun book has a lot more activities where you can try some of those activities. And that's kind of what I do in the clinic, is that I kind of start with, the swing, and they're like, they didn't like the swing. It's a general calming activity. And I'm like, okay, what do they like? They have a sensory bucket with rice. They like that one a lot better. So then I go tell the parent,
he likes swinging.
Yeah. So there's a list of activities you can try, and then you just start whittling down on them and say, they like this one, they don't like this one, they like this one. So let me give more of this one, and so that book's this Out of Sync Child Has Fun is a really good book to get it started. And if you end up still in a clinic where an OT is needing to help you, then a lot of things that I love it, because then the parent is like, with a knowledge base of some things they can tell me yes or no on, they've already tried, then I can go from there. So to me, it's a win-win situation. You either, get a lot of help through just the book alone, or you're go to an OT and then you're further along because you've already said some of these things don't work. I don't need to try them in the clinic then. So.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Mr. Howard, did you have a question?
Oh, wait a minute. Don't do that.
You're no longer muted, Mr. Howard. I guess he didn't have a question. Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, I'd like to thank Ms. Vonda for taking time out of her busy schedule to come and participate in this webinar with us. If you have future questions, something that you didn't think about tonight or maybe in the morning, you can always email us your questions, and I can get those questions to Ms. Vonda so that we can get those things answered for you. I see Mr. Howard raised his hand again. So Mr. Howard, did you have a question? You're no longer on mute, so you can actually speak. Okay. Well, if he has a question, then he can always send that question to either myself or to Wallace, and then we can get that question over to you, Ms. Vonda, and get that answered for him.
Perfect.
So thank you so much. I appreciate what you've done for us, and hopefully we will see you next year.
Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank everybody for participating. Enjoy the rest of your evening.